Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series on radio and podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Qualia. Shop Qualia Senolytics. Please check out our show notes today for more details. Today we explore the fascinating stories and invaluable insights from experts dedicated to improving our lives and well-being. We have an exceptional guest today who will guide us through the transformative journey of mastering stress, slowing aging, and increasing vitality. Our guest today is Dr. Stephen Sidoroff, an internationally recognized psychologist, executive, and medical consultant with over 4 decades of experience in resilience, longevity, optimal performance, addiction, neurofeedback, and mental health. Dr. Stephen Sidoroff is an associate professor in the departments of psychiatry and behavioral sciences and rheumatology at UCLA's Geffen School of Medicine. He has made pioneering contributions in his field and has been instrumental in establishing innovative training and treatment approaches across the globe, including the US, China, and Europe. Dr. Stephen Sidoroff's latest book is titled The 9 Pillars of Resilience: The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. The book offers a holistic methodology based on 9 key pillars designed to help individuals thrive amidst overwhelming stress. In today's world, where economic uncertainty, political upheaval, international conflict, and environmental devastation weigh heavily on our minds, his insights couldn't be more timely or relevant. Today, we have the privilege of diving deep into these concepts with Dr. Sidoroff himself. We'll explore the evolutionary mismatches of modern stress, the critical role of self-compassion, the power of purpose, and much more. So sit back, relax, get ready to be inspired by Dr. Stephen Sidoroff's profound knowledge and actionable insights. Dr. Stephen Sidoroff, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you here to discuss your incredible work in the transformative power of resilience.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Paul.
It's great to talk to you, too. I really am excited to talk to you about your book, The 9 Pillars, and I want to jump right in and get to that. But I wonder if we can start with you telling us a little bit about your own journey and the significance of that, the role that it's played in both a personal journey as well as a professional journey that's allowed you to really understand the subjects of resilience, which is one of the foremost topics in your new book, The 9 Pillars.
I enjoy life to the fullest. So I'm always interested in the mysteries of life. And to me, one of the biggest mysteries is how we function. What makes us tick? What makes change possible? These are some of the biggest questions we all ask, but I feel blessed that I can wake up every morning and my whole work is about finding answers to those big questions. When I sit down with a person or a group, I see it as a mystery. How do we solve this mystery? Someone comes in and they have difficulty falling asleep. They have anxiety. Okay, that's a mystery. How do we tease that apart and come up with the answers to help them overcome their anxiety or get better night's sleep? And when I put all of this together, we're talking about optimal functioning. We're talking about how do we function in the most optimal way? Because when we function in the most optimal way, that's my definition of resilience. One of the bases of resilience is having a growth mindset. So if we experience a shortcoming within ourselves, we don't feel, well, I'm stuck with this. We don't feel like, well, I'm branded by this. And many people come in and they feel like their anxiety is who they are. And so a growth mindset is saying none of this is in your DNA. All of it is learned. And if it's learned, it can be unlearned. It may not be easy, but it's possible. And that's what I offer the people that I work with. That's what I offer in my book, is that there's always a best approach, no matter what's going on in your life.
And I would think, too, no matter how old you are, I'm 67. I think it's important to think of life as evolving and the ability to pivot seems to come from resilience too. You seem to be somebody who has forged ahead in some new directions in your life.
When I first got into my career, this is amazing. When I first got into my career, the belief was that you were born with a full complement of neurons. And then as you age, you just lose them. So the first day you're born, from there, it's downhill. You're just losing neurons. And in more recent years, we have discovered that, in fact, the opposite is true, that we are capable of birthing new nerve cells throughout our lives into old age. That's an amazing new discovery. And complementing that, the notion of neurogenesis, birthing of new nerve cells, is neuroplasticity. And that's how new learning, like this half hour that you and I are together, if it's impactful to your audience, it will actually trigger new nerve growth in their brains. That's amazing.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book then, The 9 Pillars of Resilience. The title just jumped right out at me as I was doing my research. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the core content of the book. And maybe you'll spend a minute with us summarizing some of these foundational elements in the 9 pillars and pick one or two that you think are just so powerful and impactful for our audience in terms of how we're looking at our lives going ahead and how we can be more resilient.
Definitely. So the first of my 9 pillars is our relationship with ourselves. I say to people, think about the most important relationship in your life, and they'll think of their spouse, they'll think of their parent, their children. And I want to emphasize that our most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves. And this takes me into the lessons of our childhood impact us as adults into old age, because the earliest learning that we engage in is survival learning. We figure out how to be in the world based on how our parents, our primary caregivers, respond to us, which may not be the best way. As a result, we grow up with a relationship with ourselves that is less than optimal. And by that, I mean we can be critical with ourselves, judgmental, and those criticisms that we give to ourselves, those judgments, undermine our growth, undermine our resilience. So the first pillar is developing a healthy relationship with yourself. What I like to do and what I do in my book in this particular chapter is I talk about one's existing relationship and for people to begin recognizing how they talk to themselves. And we talk to ourselves, we could be very critical, judgmental, as I mentioned before. And now we want to think about an optimal model of an internal voice, what I refer to as our internal parent. What's a healthy internal parent do? They speak from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, care, and joy. So now we have the model of a healthy voice. And part of my approach in my book is to help people migrate from this old existing voice that can be too harsh and critical over to a healthy internal voice that comes from this place of love and acceptance. So that's one key that I will emphasize here. The second key has to do with having a growth mindset that I mentioned before. I like to bust a myth that we all have about resilience. Most people think of resilience as the ability to bounce back, right? I'm sure you've heard that expression. Well, I say that that is no longer optimal, and that what we want to think about is that resilience is bouncing forward. And what I mean by that is every time we engage in a challenge, every time we have a stressful experience, we want to learn a lesson from that experience. So at the end of it, we're better off than when we started. We're further along the path. We know more. We know something so that the next stress we encounter, we will handle in an even better way. That's a second important component. The third has to do with our emotions. And this is my sixth pillar, emotional balance and mastery. Most of us walk around carrying what I refer to as unfinished emotional business. We're upset about this relationship. We're resentful in my relationship with this person. We may be still carrying upsets for mistakes that we made ourselves. All of this emotion is actually mobilizing our bodies, motion is the core of emotion. And so not only does it mobilize our bodies, but then we have to hold in that energy, that emotional energy. And all of that puts us out of balance. It also causes us to overreact in situations. We know in relationships, we let things slide. We don't address certain feelings that we have. And then suddenly the partner says something and we explode because it's tapping into that pool of unfinished emotional business. So it's very important for people to work through their unfinished emotional business with others because it gets in the way of being loving with them. I like to say that we approach the world either from an open heart or from protecting our hearts. And too much of the time, we're protecting the heart and we're not allowing ourselves the full benefit of being a loving person and being in loving relationships.
I like this idea of rather than bouncing back, we bounce forward. And stress certainly is something that is in our lives, perhaps much more today than it ever has been historically. And I wonder if you'll help us understand some of the challenging aspects of stress and give us a couple of coping mechanisms that dive deeper into a little of the coping mechanisms that you've developed that can help us sidestep and move forward rather than bounce back.
Life is getting more and more complex. People say, I have more and more things to do. In fact, when I ask people, what's the biggest source of your stress? Many people simply say, it's how many things I need to be doing. It's the amount of things. It's the time pressure. All of these things are stressful. One of the things that's important to realize is that stress is not all bad. In fact, our stress response is a useful response to many situations. It helps us be focused. It helps us concentrate. It helps us be more motivated. So stress can be a good thing. And that's why people have difficulty dealing with it, because it's not just bad. There's a sweet spot of how much stress is good for you and how much is not. While there's this sweet spot of optimal stress, most of us overshoot it and are in the too much range, in which both health and performance begin to fall by the wayside. To begin with, it's important for people to realize stress is not just bad, that it can be helpful to us. And that's important because a lot of people feel like, oh, I shouldn't be experiencing stress. No, you can't avoid stress in the world we live in. And so the first thing is to be accepting that stress is a part of our lives. But then the next step that's so important is to realize that stress activates our nervous system. There are two branches to our nervous system. One, the sympathetic that activates to stress. The other, the parasympathetic that we need to go into to recover all the resources used up in the stress response. But for most of us, you think about our day, there's a lot of stimuli that trigger the stress response. It's triggered danger, threat, uncertainty. But how many of us have any triggers at all during the day that trigger the relaxation response, the recovery response? An important tip for everybody is you want to find what I refer to as islands of safety in your day. It could be at lunchtime where you sit down for lunch and you could say to yourself, I'm on an island of safety, which means I could let down my guard. It means I can relax. It means if I'm talking to a friend, I can engage in a warm, connecting way that gives me sustenance by emotional nourishment. So it's finding times in the day that you can identify as an island of safety. At the end of your day, you want to make a conscious note. My workday is over. Now I can turn down that activation. A lot of your audience may be retired. Well, we hold on to old patterns. And so even when we're retired, we may wake up and look, where's the danger going to be today? What's the problem going to be today? And I encourage everybody to shift that into what can go well today? What's the good thing that can happen to me today?
Mhm.
And in particular, when you finish a stressful experience, you want to take note. It's over. I can relax. I could let down my guard. And so we have many things that activate the stress response. We have to come up with things to activate the recovery response.
Hi, it's Paul. I mentioned that our sponsor is Qualia Senolytics today, and I want to talk about them for just a moment, but I have said many times to everybody, I live just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm a former U.S. federal government official. I've heard all sorts of comments directed at government officials, of course, and the sentiments that so-and-so is senile, all of that stuff have echoed throughout our nation's history, particularly during election years, which is where we are right now. Well, I, for one, believe neither seniors, not Old Better Show audience, nor senators, or any of us should have to feel senile. In fact, I've used Qualia Senolytic to promote my own mental and physical fitness. Here's how. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. These senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, and sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-aged feeling. Qualia Senolytic removes those worn-out senescent cells to allow the rest of the cells to thrive in the body. Personally, I found I had more energy. I felt years younger over the last 2 months, and I'm even more enthusiastic. Resist aging at the cellular level for better aging. Our dear Not Old Better Show audience, please try Qualia Senolytics. Go to qualialife.com/NOB for up to 50% off and use the code NOB at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's qualialife.com/NOB. Use the code NOB and you'll get additionally 15% off. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode. All of this will be in our show notes. Thanks, everybody. Dr. Stephen Sideroff is our guest today, author of the new book, The 9 Pillars of Resilience, The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, I love that, and Increased Vitality. This is fascinating stuff, and I congratulate you. The book is wonderful. We're going to put links so that our audience can find out more about Dr. Sideroff, in particular, his new book. I've enjoyed my research of you, Dr. Sideroff, but I'm not the only one. As a matter of fact, Dr. David Perlmutter says that Dr. Sideroff's book, The 9 Pillars of Resilience, is a masterful guide for achieving happiness, health, and success. What a great statement about your book and your work, Dr. Sideroff. I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of islands of safety, because it really strikes me as being something of great importance for us. And you talk about the significance of relationships. And so talk to us about establishing a safe relationship too, because that, I think, is part of perhaps this islands of safety. Might be a little bit stressful, but we need to make sure and have that in our lives, because that gives us this idea of fulfillment. And it brings about some vitality that I think all of us are after too.
Yes, definitely. It's a very good question. Most people, I'm sure, are familiar with what's been termed now the blue zones.
Yeah.
These are areas around the world where people live to an older age. They seem to be doing something right. And one of the things that's true in all of those is that community is important. Relationship is important. To your audience here, your relationships can be a source of stress, or they can be a source of emotional nourishment.
Yeah.
We want our relationships to be a source of emotional nourishment. And part of that is choosing who we are in relationship with. We want to be in relationship with people who, when we're with them, we just feel this sense of relief. We could let down our guard, because we know there's no danger there. We know that the person we're in relationship with has our best interest at heart. We can be in other relationships where maybe there's some competition. Maybe we know that that person is judging us, or we're concerned that that person is judging us. Those relationships can be stressful. And so you want to start making discriminations and spending more time with loving, supportive relationships and less time with relationships that can be stressful. This is simply part of you designing your environment, selecting your environment. Our environments that we live in is a key component to how resilient we can be. And it's our responsibility to choose the environments that support our ability to relax and recover. And as I said, healthy relationships offer emotional nourishment. When you have emotional nourishment, your body actually functions better. If we look at our heart rate rhythm, what's referred to as heart rate variability, we find that when we're in a place of gratitude, positive emotion, which happens in positive relationships, our heart rate pattern goes into this nice coherent pattern where as we breathe in, our heart rate goes up. As we breathe out, our heart rate goes down. When we're in more stressful environments, our heart rate rhythm becomes chaotic. And so there's a direct connection between our physiology and our environment and the relationships that we choose.
I really like this subtitle of yours, in particular about slowing aging and increasing vitality. And so I want to talk to you about this idea of having a purpose in life, because I think feeling as though we're part of something, making sure to have a contribution, those are proven, both scientifically proven as well as psychologically proven, to give us a real influence on our health and in particular resilience. And so I wonder if you'll talk for a moment or two about having a purpose-driven life and what it means to us.
Definitely. In fact, I wrote an article for Psychology Today specifically on this topic of purpose.
Yep.
And let me preface this by saying that we have a lot of control over the speed with which we age. That's an amazing statement, isn't it? We have some control over the speed in which we age. Research has demonstrated that stress speeds up aging. And there are many studies that have demonstrated that. And so the more we become resilient, the more we get into this place of balance, the more we're slowing the aging process. Now, purpose is an interesting thing because I have a particular belief of how important purpose is to slowing our aging process. If we think about from an evolutionary perspective, Paul, we know that we are designed biologically to live through the ages of reproduction, where we produce offspring, and then live long enough to help those offsprings become independent. But from an evolutionary perspective, once we reach that age, we're then no longer needed for our species for its future. And so biologically, we're literally designed to start dying in our 30s. If you look at a lot of biological markers, they start to decrease in around the 30 to 40 year range. But we have some tools in our tool chest here. And I'm going to talk about one of them that's very relevant for this conversation, and that is epigenetics. And we know that our genetics are fixed, but epigenetics, epi means on top of our genetics. Our experience impacts our genetic makeup through epigenetics, and it determines which genes are going to turn on and be expressed and which aren't. Now, I'm suggesting that if you have a purpose in your life, you're telling your genes, hey, I have this purpose that's important, and I need to live a long life because it's going to take me a while to fully express this purpose in my world. We can literally send messages through this process of epigenetics that tells our bodies we have to stay healthy longer because of this purpose. And the title of my article is Purpose, the Ultimate in Use It or Lose It. And so particularly for your audience, I really encourage people to identify the meaning that life has for them and identify a purpose, something that they can engage in that really gives them a passion for life and a reason for waking up in the morning.
Fascinating, Dr. Sidoroff. We're just about to engage in another round of elections and political debate. That can be very stressful. Climate change is another enormous stressor that all of us are facing. And particularly in my audience, there's a great deal of upset around loneliness and isolation. And so from your book, from the 9 pillars of resilience, give us a couple strategies and techniques that we can walk away with today that'll help us as we face some of these big challenges and big stressors, but still rely on our resilience.
Number one, remember that any time that you're stressed, you're mobilizing energy in your body. You could watch a program on TV that's a political program, and you could be sitting there and you could be fuming. You could be sitting there and you could be getting upset, right?
Right.
You need to find a way to express and get that emotions out.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to just sit there. If you're upset and you're angry, slam the pillow, get that energy out. The other thing is that one of the keys to resilience is feeling in control in your life. And one of the consequences of what's going on politically, climate-wise, is it's very easy to feel kind of helpless in light of these big issues going on.
Yeah.
It's very helpful if you could take some action. You can do something, volunteer, get on a committee, write letters to your congressman. It's very important to feel like you're doing something to address these issues, even if it's teeny tiny, even if it's a small step. But you want to find some way where you feel like you're having an impact, where you feel like you're doing something to address something that you feel is bothering you so much. So finding some way to have control, getting out your feelings, talking to other people about it, all of these things, and talking to other people. The side benefit is now you're in relationship, you're in contact, you're not feeling isolated. So we don't want to feel isolated in what's going on around us. We want to find some way of being in relationship with other people and with the very situations that you're upset or want to address. Find some way to take action.
Wonderful. Dr. Steven Sideroff, thank you so much for your time today. Dr. Sideroff's book is titled The 9 Pillars of Resilience, The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. Dr. Sideroff, we'd love to have you back. I'll just selfishly put that out there right now. What a joy it is to talk to you. Congratulations on your book. You're obviously living this, and so I know our audience is going to be excited to hear from you again. And please, as you're doing more work, writing more articles, writing more books, please come back and see us.
I'd be happy to. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. People can go to my website, drstephensideroff.com. There I have a lot of useful information that people can find out about on my website. You could sign up to be on my mailing list, and I send out messages on a weekly basis about being more resilient.
Wonderful. Absolutely. We're going to put links so that our audience can find out more about Dr. Sideroff and his newsletter and all of this great stuff. I'm going to take away this Islands of Safety. Dr. Sideroff, thank you so much for that. I appreciate your time with us. Thanks for being so generous. Have a great rest of your day.
Very good. Thank you. Good questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Sideroff, on the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series on radio and podcast. Today's show has been brought to you by Qualia. Please support our sponsors as they, in turn, support the show. My thanks to executive producer Sam Henniger for all his work with sound design and everything else. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Be well, be safe. And let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show. To find out more about all of today's stories or to view our extensive back catalog of previous shows, simply visit notold-better.com. Join us again next time as we deep dive into some of the most fascinating real-life stories from across the world, all focused on this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show.
Hi, one final thing. Please check out our website for this episode and all episodes at notold-better.com or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to check out your local radio stations to find out more about the Not Old Better Show on podcast and radio. You can find us all over social media. Our Twitter feed is Not Old Better, and we're on Instagram at Not Old Better too. The Not Old Better Show is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm Paul Vogelsang, and I hope you'll join me again next time to talk about better. The Not Old Better Show. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.